Hey y'all, I am Dani and welcome back here to Summer Skye Gardens. So it is the beginning of September and I walked out this morning and it was actually slightly cool. So excited for that little nip of fall in the air. This is what we in the South call false fall because it will definitely get hot again at some point, but I'll take what I can get, especially working outside here at the farm. I thought this would be a really good opportunity to talk about landscaping and adding plants to your garden, your landscape around your home, or even at your farm. Fall in the South is the perfect time to plant any kind of like shrubs, trees, perennials, because we have such a mild winter. They can grow typically, no problem throughout the winter and establish a really strong root system before the heat of next summer sets in. Summer is typically the hardest time of year for plants to grow here in South Texas. And so you don't want to wait to plant a lot of these in spring or early summer because it'll get really hot and dry really fast and they will really struggle. So if you can plant them in the fall or even early winter, it's really better for a lot of these plants. And I have kind of a list of the top plants that I have grown that I've really come to enjoy. I have them growing at my home. I also have a bunch growing here at the farm. Some of them you can use for cut flowers. Some of them are decorative. However, all of these have benefits, especially for attracting pollinators or predatory insects and supporting the local wildlife. So even if this is something that does not make a great cut flower, it will provide interest, it will provide beauty, and it will support your local wildlife and improve the biodiversity of your garden or your farm. So I think all of these can be great choices if you're looking for something to add that is a flowering plant that will thrive in a southern hot climate. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you like this type of content. If you guys have any questions, you can comment below. Throughout the video, I will put up some pictures or video, especially if they're plants that I have currently in bloom. I do have a lot of pictures and video here of every plant, and I'll kind of just give you a run through about each plant. Some of them I actually have further videos on, in which case I will link those below. So the first plant that I'll talk about, I probably recommend to almost anybody when they ask me, oh, what's a good plant to add to my garden or my landscape, or I have this spot over here and I want something that's going to be really pretty. I always suggest drift roses. In fact, I love them so much, I made an entire video dedicated to just drift roses, and I will link that down below. But I really love these because they are just super foolproof and they're very beautiful. When you think of roses, you think of like the really big blooms, long stems, cut flowers. A lot of those can be very, I don't want to say difficult to grow, but very specialized. And I would not recommend a lot of roses for the brand new gardener or farmer because they take a lot of specialty care. And I think you just need some other experience before you dive into roses. They're also a big investment. And so if you don't go into it knowing what you're doing, you could be out a lot of money. But drift roses are pretty like foolproof. Anyone can grow them. They come in a variety of colors, peaches, pinks, yellows, whites, reds. Just think of kind of any rose color. That's what you're going to be able to find in a drift rose. They stay relatively compact. And what I mean by that is just like lower to the ground, not super tall. They will get pretty big if you grow them right. They can get to like 4 or 5 feet wide, couple of feet tall. They will bloom sporadically through the year, but of course in the warm-ish months, they will produce the best blooms, so like spring and fall. Not as much in the summer and not in the winter, but in the summer, if you do have slightly cooler temps here and there, they will kind of reflush and reflush. But they are drought hardy, extremely heat tolerant. I have found them to be pretty disease and pest free. I've been growing them for years and I've not had any issues with them. And they are a huge magnet for bees. So if you're looking for something that will also support bees, bees love roses, bees love drift roses. So I would highly recommend these for, any kind of area that you want to add something beautiful to, that you really don't have to do a lot of maintenance for. Drift roses are going to be a great addition. The next one I'll mention is one that I also mentioned to a lot of people, and that is going to be lantana. Now, there is a variety called Texas lantana. It is like red and orange flowers. That one is native to Texas, but there's a lot of other varieties, a lot of different colors of flowers, from purples to pinks to yellows, that you can get. They're all going to have a similar growth habit. They can get really big and wild if you let them. They produce all these small little clusters of flowers that the bees and the butterflies go nuts for. They are very drought tolerant, very heat tolerant, and almost impossible to kill. I've had some survive days of snow, days of ice, single digit temperatures, all the way up to months of 100+ degree temperatures. And they may die back, they may struggle, but they will come right back, no problem. You can trim them back however you want, but as long as they get a pretty steady amount of water here and there, they will continuously bloom from spring all the way into fall. So they're one of those plants that do bloom in the summer, and that can be hard to come by. So I really like them for that fact. You can't cut them, of course, but they're such a great addition to a garden or to landscaping. I have some here at the farmhouse. They really fill in a space and, of course, drown out the areas for weeds to grow. But the butterflies love them. And so I love, catching lantana in the sun and seeing all the butterflies be attracted to it. It's always a great choice for your garden. Speaking of butterflies, the next kind of group of plants I'll talk about are milkweeds. Now, milkweed is the host plant for the monarch butterfly. Monarch butterflies are now labeled as an endangered species. Unfortunately, their numbers have been declining over the last 20 years. If you don't live in an area that they migrate through, they will kind of spread across the United States, but there's two main migrations kind of between northern US down to Mexico and then on the West Coast along California. They will go down south for the winter and then kind of go back up once the temperatures warm back up. And their numbers have dwindled because there's not enough host plants due to, just development, pesticide use, dying out. And so the best thing that we can do for monarch butterflies to support them is to plant milkweeds. There are a bunch of different varieties of milkweeds, and depending on where you live, there are going to be some that are native to your areas that may not be native to other areas. In general, planting any kind of milkweed should be fine, but if you can go with native varieties to your region, that's going to be better. And there's lots of different ones, lots of different colored flowers. But in my experience, and I've grown several different types of milkweed, they will kind of die back over the winter, which you want them to because you want all the butterflies to be down south in Mexico. And then they will grow back as the temperatures warm up, which is perfect because then the butterflies are kind of coming back up. They need those plants to lay their eggs on and to host the caterpillars, which will turn into future monarch butterflies, as well as the monarch butterflies also sipping from the nectar from the actual flowers. One of my favorite ones that I've been growing is my giant milkweed. I think it's on year 5 now. And I'll tell you, this thing is so tough. I mean, it has died all the way down to the ground to the point where I thought it was completely dead. And then it regrows to like 8 or 9 feet tall. It's a huge bushy plant, so it also provides like some privacy in my backyard. It produces these big clusters of white flowers, so it's a great pollinator plant. It's a great supportive plant for the monarch butterfly, but it's also a really cool looking plant, a fast growing plant, and one that is very hard to kill. So if you can, I always recommend to add milkweed to your garden. The next group that I'll talk about are salvia or sage plants. And a lot of these you can actually cut as cut flowers. Now, most of these are going to produce either like bluish to purple flowers. Some of them might be reddish or pink, but most of them I would say are in kind of the bluish purple range. And so they're highly attractive to bees, especially a lot of the native like bumblebees or carpenter bees. Butterflies are also attracted to them. Side note, if you want to attract bees, they are most attracted to blues and purples. If you want to attract butterflies, they are most attracted to pinks and purples. So you can't go wrong with purple flowers. But yeah, pink, purple, blue, anything in that family is highly attractive to bees and butterflies. They will die back in the winter when it freezes, but regrow super easily and super fast. And I find that they also kind of produce flushes. So they will get really big and bushy and produce flowers as the heat sets in. Those original blooms will kind of die down, and then you'll start to see new growth coming from the bottom of the plant. So you can kind of cut all those dead, dying flowers down, and then new ones will flush back up. But really big, bushy plants, these make great companion plants for roses. I love the pop of the blue or the purple amongst other colors of flowers, and they're just a super awesome pollinator plant. And especially the ones that are more of a bluish color produce a really beautiful cut, spiky flower, especially in the summer. And that's a hard color to come by in flowers in general, but especially in cut flowers. So if you're looking to add something along the lines of like a bluish purple, then I highly advise you to look for certain varieties of salvia or sage plants that have that. A couple of native varieties that grow here in Texas, you have Texas sage, which will produce little bitty clusters of purple flowers and a really pretty silver foliage. And then you also have Mexican bush sage, which gets really big and bushy and produces these gorgeous, huge stalks of blooms that almost look like velvet. So very, very pretty, but can't go wrong with adding sage or salvia to your garden, your landscape, or your cut flower farm. The next group I'll talk about that also produces great cut flowers are hydrangea plants. And in particular for here in the South, in a hotter climate, oak leaf hydrangea plants. I'll be honest, with the heat here, it is hard to grow traditional like French hydrangeas, the ones that are like the beautiful pinks and bluish purples. But oak leaf hydrangea is way more heat tolerant, and they grow fast, they grow big and bushy, and they produce these kind of pyramid looking clusters of white hydrangea flowers that are gorgeous to cut from when they first start to open to when they're fully open to when they're starting to die back. They make excellent cut flowers, but they also produce like a really big, gorgeous flowering plant that will flower kind of in late spring, early summer. And I've really enjoyed growing them here. In fact, I've planted some more at the farm because I want to be harvesting these for sale and for use as part of my cut flower farm. But one thing I specifically like about the oak leaf hydrangea is how well it does in the shade. I always have people asking me like, I have this shady area, what can I grow in partial shade, or what'll grow well in full shade? And hydrangeas are going to be a great choice. And in the heat, especially an oak leaf hydrangea. All right, next on the list is probably something that you've seen before and maybe thought about or not thought about, but This plant is black-eyed Susan flowers. You can definitely cut these. They're part of the Rudbeckia family, and a lot of flower farmers grow Rudbeckia. But the black-eyed Susans are native to Texas, and they're kind of a mix between a biennial and a perennial flower, kind of depending on where you live. I like to think of them as you throw some seed out, the seed produces these big, beautiful plants, and they will either self-seed new plants or they will kind of die back and regrow and flower the next year. So you get like a mix of a perennial and a biennial plant. But once you throw seed out, I'm telling you, they will regrow and regrow and regrow to no end. I have had like a huge field area covered in them in the late spring, and it was just so gorgeous. And like I said, you can cut these for use as cut flowers. Bees love them, butterflies love them. They're a native plant, so of course they're going to be, more drought and heat tolerant, but a really beautiful pop of yellow color to add into your garden or on your farm. As always, I'm always a huge fan of planting native plants, and you can't go wrong with black-eyed Susans. The next one on my list is one that's a little bit newer to me, but one that I've enjoyed growing the last couple of years, and that is Greg's Mist Flower. So this plant I kind of liken it to a salvia plant in just the manner of how it grows and kind of regrows. It produces purpley flowers. It's a lot smaller than a lot of the salvia plants, but just as gorgeous. And the butterflies love this flower to no end. I believe it's a host plant for a specific type of butterfly that is escaping me at the moment, but definitely a gorgeous plant to add in for pollinators. You can cut these and use it as a cut flower. I just don't find that they really get big enough to make much of an impact. A similar flower to this that I grow for cut flowers is Azuratum, which will get a lot bigger and taller. But Greg's Mist Flower is similar. So I grow it just as a pollinator plant, a landscaping plant. And so that's what I typically recommend it for. All right, next on the list, I'll talk about Duranta. So Duranta is a great native plant that you can grow here in Texas or, in a lot of hotter environments. It produces long stalks, typically with bluish purple flowers. I think there are some varieties that will produce white flowers as well, but I like the ones that produce the bluish purple flowers. It can get huge in the right climate and sun exposure. My neighbor has one that is probably like 8 feet tall. The ones I have stay around like 4 to 5 feet tall, but huge butterfly magnet, beautiful flowers that grow throughout the summer, really easy to take care of. Once again, heat tolerant, drought tolerant. You really don't have to do a whole lot to it. So it is another landscaping plant that I typically recommend. Next on the list is Esperanza, which is also a Texas native. So this plant, to me, it has a similar growth pattern to the Duranta, where it'll produce these long stems with clusters of flowers, but the clusters of these flowers are yellow. They look like little bells. Huge hit with bumblebees. So, bumblebees are native to the United States. This is a great plant to add in to support your native pollinators. And this is one of the few plants, in my opinion, that will bloom all summer, no matter how hot or how dry it gets. I have other plants that'll kind of cut back their blooming a little bit when it gets too hot, but this one just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. So I love Esperanza. I think it's a beautiful plant to add into your landscaping. Not a great cut flower, but it is a pollinator supporter, and you can't go wrong with adding those in. All right, next on the list, we have Turk's Cap, which is another Texas native plant. This one, depending on where it grows, can get really big and bushy. And depending on how much sunlight it has, will either produce a ton of blooms or like a little bit of blooms. Now, it is one of the few plants that will bloom fairly well in the shade, But of course, the more sun it gets, it will produce a lot of blooms. And they are these little bitty, little red flowers that look like a Turkman's cap, thus the name. They are a huge hit with pollinators, especially hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are usually attracted to red flowers. So if you want to support hummingbirds, you can add in Turk's cap. They will kind of die back in the winter and then regrow super fast, heat tolerant, drought tolerant, really, low maintenance. And I believe most of the plant can be used in either medicinal uses or for food. Double check, look that up for me, but if memory serves correct, I believe that is the case. But definitely a great landscaping plant, especially because it can get really big and bushy. It's great for privacy. It's great for, filling in areas in your landscaping. Maybe you should try adding in Turk's cap. All right, the last plant that I will recommend here is going to be beautyberry. Beautyberry is a cool plant in that it produces flowers in the spring, which then later, late in the summer and into fall, become berries. The berries can actually be made into an edible jelly that's similar in flavor to like an elderberry. They are a beautiful, gorgeous purple color, so they look really cool in the landscaping, and the birds especially love them. So if you have a lot of birds on your farm or, around your home, beautyberry is a beautiful native plant that you can add in that will greatly support your local native bird population. But all of the plant is edible. I know some people that have eaten the leaves as part of a salad. I've never tried that, but I know a lot of people that do use the berries. I've been told, I've never tried it, but I've been told if you eat them raw, they don't taste that great. But if you make them into a jelly, just as you would use any other fruit to make a jelly, it actually tastes pretty good. Never tried it myself, but take people's word for it. But it is a beautiful, easy plant to grow that can produce, not only interest in your landscaping or around your farm, but also support your local wildlife. So there you have it. These are all kind of my top flowering shrub plants that might be used for cut flowers, might not, support your pollinators. A lot of these are natives. They're very easy to grow. And like I said, fall is fast approaching, which is a great time to add these into your garden, your landscaping, or at your farm. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions on any of these plants, comment below. If I don't offhand know the answer, I will go find it for you. But I hope you guys found this interesting, and I will see y'all in my next video.